Okay, we're back in section 9.1, and just recall that our two options are to reject or do not reject the null hypothesis. So for type 1 and type 2 errors, what would happen is we would reject the null hypothesis, but it was actually true. So basically what we're saying is we rejected the null, but we shouldn't have because it was true. And then a type 2 error, and this is really helpful to remember, is we fail to reject the null hypothesis, when it's false. Basically saying the null hypothesis was false, but we do not reject it, and we should. And we're going to do a couple of examples here. And we're not going to go too deep into the probability of these errors. So again, a type 1 error is we reject the null hypothesis, but it was true. And a type 2 error is when we do not reject it, we fail to reject it, and it is false. Let's look at a couple examples here. So consider the following hypotheses that relate to the medical example mentioned earlier. A null hypothesis: a person is free of a particular disease, and an alternative is a person has a particular disease. Suppose the person takes a medical test that attempts to detect this disease. Discuss the consequences of a type 1 and type 2 error. All right, so let's go back here. A type 1 error is when we reject the null. We reject it. We say, it's no good, but it's true when it was true. So what does that mean in this situation? What if we rejected the null? So that means we reject the null. What does that mean? That means the person has the disease. We reject the null. We say that they have the disease, but really it was true. So really, they are free of the disease. Well, if we say someone has the disease and they really don't have it, that would be, sometimes we call that a false positive. That's a type 1 error. Type 2 error. That's when we fail to reject the null. We say, okay, we're failing to reject it. We accept the null when it's actually false. So we fail to reject the null, which means we reject the alternative. So we say the person is free of disease, but really, we were wrong. They have the disease. That would be, okay, we say that they don't have it, negative, but it was false. So if we kind of think about that, maybe we could say, like, what is worse, a type 1 or a type 2 error? You would probably say that maybe the false negative would be worse, because, they really have it, but now they think they don't have it. Whereas a false positive, maybe they'd get another test. This one agrees that a false negative, that could be more of a consequence. We'll do one more example together. So consider these hypotheses. An accused person is innocent, null. Alternative, an accused person is guilty. Suppose the accused person is judged by a jury of her peers. Discuss the consequences of a type 1 and type 2 error. So we'll do the same thing here. A type 1, just to remind you, we reject the null, but the null is true. So let's look at what that means in the situation. We reject the null, so we cross that out. So we say the person is guilty, but really they are innocent. Yikes, right? All right, what's a type 2 error? A type 2 is we fail to reject the null. So we fail to reject the null, but the null is false. So we fail to reject the null, which means we accept the null. We say that the person is innocent, but really, we shouldn't have done that. Really, they are guilty. Now, I think in this case, it's impossible to know which one is more harmful. They're both extremely harmful. And the textbook agrees that it's impossible to say which one is more costly, but you get the idea. So go ahead and give these two a try, discussing the consequences for the type 1 and type 2 errors, and press play when you're ready to see the solution. And there you go. And that concludes 9.1.